Welcome to what promises to be a fascinating show today. Up first, we'll be listening to Patrick Holford, who's got an update of what's been going on in Wuhan, in China. Then, at about 20 past 10, the brilliant Dr. David and Dr. Jen Unwin will be joining us to really talk about sugar. Can we live without it? How do we live without it? Is it addictive? And I've got a great question for them. I'm going to say, look, if you had 5 minutes on national TV, like a party political broadcast, what would be the message we'd want to get across to our nation with suffering from so many different illnesses? If you're new to us, welcome to the Food Bank Show. My name's Steve Bennett. I'm your host. Every day we'll be talking to experts across the UK and around the world, getting their tips on how to live healthy, happy, and how to at the same time build our defence up against things like COVID, things like the flu. At the same time, we're trying to raise money and awareness for the food banks of the UK. Right now, there's a huge problem in that more people than ever, sadly, are needing the help of the food banks. We've got to do everything we can to try and help people, because we shouldn't have hunger in the UK. But obviously, with what's happening with COVID and lockdown and more people losing their jobs, more people than ever are relying on support from the brilliant food banks. We're supporting the Trussell Trust that work with 1,200 food banks, and together we need to build awareness and also raise money via the Just Giving page, because we really have got to support one another through these difficult times. We have a competition every day, and we say, what did you cook for the first time yesterday? Well, yesterday, I'm going to tell you what I cooked first of all. After having the Caldesis on, I got really inspired by one of their recipes in their new book. So I went off and I cooked myself some flaxseed crackers, and I had them last night with cheese. The whole family enjoyed them, and no carbohydrates, just full of protein. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. We'll also have a look at what you cooked for the first time yesterday. And then every day we also give you a food fact, but we can leave that for a little bit later on today, because it's quite an interesting food fact we've got. But let's dive straight in, and let's go and talk to Patrick Holford, who we spoke to last week, and lots of you watched the clip and recommended the clip to so many people that it's had lots and lots of views on YouTube and everywhere else that we've put it. And Patrick's got a bit of an update from around the world of what's happening with the virus, and in particular, that, by the way, that's not live. That is Patrick with his new book, which launches this Thursday, which is called Flu Fighting. Patrick, good morning. How are you?
Well.
Yeah, excellent. We love that little clip we just saw of you on the bridge somewhere in Wales, I take it.
Yes, it's quite relevant actually, because there were like 3 kicks, and there have basically been 3 hospitals who've made reports in China. And over Easter, there was an emergency Zoom meeting called of international representatives, medical experts. I was the only person there from the UK, because anyone in the field of medicine will know that there is a registered National Institute of Health approved double-blind placebo-controlled trial going on using high-dose vitamin C in seriously acute respiratory disease. These are people in ICU, intensive care units, on ventilators. And the preliminary results of this first ever clinical trial were disclosed at this meeting.
Okay.
And that's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Just to sort of, cut to the top line here. And by the way, there's been, vitamin C, which we know has way more evidence than any of the drugs currently being tested. I mean, we already know that it's antiviral. We know it stops viral replication. We know it suppresses viruses. We know it boosts the immune system. We know it works for reducing severity and duration of colds and flu. And we even know now that a lot of people with COVID-19 in acute situations are being tested with levels of vitamin C below that which would diagnose scurvy. Mm-hmm. So there's a ton of background. And the critics have said, yes, but we want a proper controlled trial before we'll do anything. However, there are drug trials going on without this. So this was a trial that was meant to take 140 people in a seriously critical situation. This is in Zhongnan Hospital, which is the major hospital in Wuhan. And half of them would get, yes, here we see it, this is Zhongnan Hospital. And actually, do you know what amazes me is I watched Horizon last week. They filmed this hospital and they didn't even bother to go inside, even though this is the most respected clinical trial that is going on. Very good design. Yeah. Half of them get intravenous vitamin C, 12 grams, which is quite a lot, over 4 hours in a drip twice a day. 24 grams. The other lot have sterile water in their drip. So that's the placebo.
Yeah.
And anyway, Professor Ziyong Peng urgently called this meeting with an appeal to get other countries repeating his study design. Because what he found, well, number one, it's slightly underpowered. He didn't get enough people. And the reason is they've got no more cases of COVID-19 going into ICUs in Wuhan. He told me that they have not had a single case for the last 2 weeks.
Wow.
Going into, so they've had to stop the trial because they've got nobody else to enter the trial. Anyway, they had achieved about 50 people on the intravenous vitamin C. And compared to placebo, they had 24 deaths. And on the placebo or the water solution, the control group had 35 deaths. That's a 31.5% decrease. In other words, 1/3 less deaths.
Wow.
And they found the people in the most critical state, which is called your pulmonary function, below 150, they were very statistically significantly saved by vitamin C. And markers of inflammation, also statistically significant reduced. Length of time requiring mechanical ventilation, again, significantly reduced. So what Dr. Peng wants is for countries like the UK to repeat this extremely good, it was a 7-day trial, by the way, 7 days of intravenous vitamin C, this extremely well-designed, thorough trial, and just get doing it. And, the worst that can happen is nothing. The best that can happen is you save lives. There's absolutely no safety issue at all. It's very expensive. So that was the first result. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. And, vitamin C in bulk isn't that expensive, is it? So, we should be trying this. Why not try it?
Well, if we were doing it last week, it actually would have saved 1,860 lives. So that really guts me that there are people who are dying right now simply because of this inability to actually do something that has phenomenally strong evidence for it. Now, the next thing that's fascinating, because there were 50 tons of vitamin C was shipped into Wuhan. Wuhan is 11.1 million population, so it's bigger than London. 50 tons went into Wuhan in February and March. And Dr. Peng told me that every single hospital worker, volunteer, medical team, staff is given 1 to 2 grams of vitamin C every day. It's mandatory. It's what they need to take. It protects them because they're going to be virally exposed. You want to have a good level. Every single hospitalized patient who comes in is given between 6 and 24 grams of vitamin C. I've often said that when you get a viral infection, you want to have 1 gram an hour. Yeah. And he told me that all the major hospitals in Wuhan have been doing this. And I asked, why are you giving hospitalized patients so much vitamin C? And he said it's because it stops them converting into a serious case that would need to go into ICU and ultimately possibly be put on a ventilator. So the point is, China is doing this. They've gone from massively high deaths to absolutely nothing. This is known. It's out there. I've written to Matt Hancock, the health minister. I've written to Sir Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS. I've written to Dominic Raab to give it to Boris when he gets back. I'm being flooded with doctors who are saying this is outrageous. We've got to get vitamin C into the National Health Service. So one of the things we've just done is we've launched a campaign, which is called Protect Our NHS with Vitamin C. And I do hope that people will go and have a look at this. I don't know if you have a link there or an image for it. Yes, it's C4UK. So you can actually go to change.org vitamin C4UK. That's what we need. And that man, by the way, is Linus Pauling, and he is the twice Nobel Prize winner who told us all this back in 1980. And we have ignored this information for 40 years, and we're continuing to ignore it. And as a consequence of that, we are letting literally thousands of people die every single week. I think this is outrageous. It cannot go on.
I think Linus Pauling's the only person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize twice. So, and Einstein said, when somebody said to Einstein, "You're a genius," he went, "No, the only genius is Linus Pauling." If he dedicated so many years of his later life researching vitamin C, which isn't patentable, so therefore there's no big money payout check at the back end of it because it's not a drug, you can't patent a vitamin. If he was going to dedicate all his later years to looking into this vitamin and to try and understand why us humans and only a few of the species can't create it, why we so need it, and why so many illnesses can be, you know, the severity of those illnesses and the boost of the immune system is so boosted by vitamin C, it's kind of criminal that we're ignoring him, really.
Well, it is, because if there was a fraction of the evidence that exists already for vitamin C for any drug, I guarantee you that drug would be being given to everybody with, you know, with serious infection with COVID-19. That is honestly the truth. It's no good to say, you know, we've got to wait until there are placebo-controlled double-blind trials, which, by the way, this is. Double-blind means that neither the medical team nor the patient knew which group they were in. So the highest possible standards of evidence was presented to me and other countries. America was there. There is a number of countries, for example, Malaysia, are starting a trial right now with this design. So there are a number of countries who are really stepping up to the mark. And I researched this. There is a factory in Scotland that makes vitamin C. And if the NHS was to give 2 grams to 10,000 workers every day for the next month, and they were to give every single hospitalized patient a gram an hour, 24 grams, they were to give every ICU patient 24 grams, ideally intravenous, the total cost of that is less than the cost of 1 ventilator.
Wow.
So we need, you know, we have NHS staff who are completely overloaded, overworked, you know, underfed. They haven't got a chance to go shopping. They can't even go and find vitamin C if they want it. We are exposing them to a high-risk virus situation. We're not protecting them. We're not protecting the people coming into hospital. And we are literally letting people die because we have this mindset that vitamin C does nothing, which is completely inaccurate if you look at the science.
And, you know, let's remind everybody that's watching, you know, the word vitamin comes from the word vital and vital for life. And vitamin Bs, all 8 Bs and C, we have to get them on a daily basis. The body doesn't store it. And we're one of very few species that don't create our own vitamin C. It's almost a design fault, if you like, in humans and primates that we don't create it, because virtually every other species creates it, and virtually every other species is immune to this disease.
Now, also, by the way, I'm going to put all these results, because this is only one hospital. There are 2 other hospitals. One has reported on 50 seriously acute respiratory disease patients treated with vitamin C. They had not one single death. None of these hospitals have reported any side effects, any adverse effects at all. So I'm going to put this up. I have a website which is flufighters.net, because as we spoke about it last week, my book, Flu Fighters, is coming out on Kindle on Thursday. So we've kind of rushed it through. But on flufighters.net, if you go to the section reports, you'll see this report on vitamin C in China. I want to tell you one other really interesting conversation I had with Dr. Peng from Zhongnan University Hospital. And that is, they have been antibody testing everybody for quite a while. So obviously all the hospital staff, the patients and so on, but because they've got a very good sort of health card surveillance digital system, I mean, their lockdown process was super efficient. They've been able to track everyone that anyone who's antibody positive, so in other words, has been exposed to the virus and developed antibodies, and who they've been in contact with. And here's a fascinating finding. Of all those that are antibody positive, they have found that about 1% became antibody positive, but had absolutely no symptoms. So in other words, they never knew they were exposed to the virus. Their body obviously responded, developed antibodies. And here's the fascinating concept. They haven't transmitted the disease to anyone else.
Right.
So it opens up the possibility that if you're possibly in very good health, possibly with lots and lots of vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D and whatever else, it's possible to be exposed to this virus, either have no symptoms at all or very minor symptoms, not transmit it, which of course would be natural anyway if you weren't coughing and sputtering and all the rest of it. And thus you basically have achieved what we could almost call a natural vaccine, because that's the purpose of vaccination, which is to introduce, an antibody response without a person suffering. And conceptually, that's very, very interesting. And the point is, this study, which showed 1/3 less deaths with intravenous vitamin C. I mean, that's really, really important.
Yeah.
This just opens things up. It gives us another option. And I hate every day to see hundreds of people dying and this complete stonewall by the British media and also largely by the medical profession, although I've got a lot of angry GPs who really think that something needs to be done about this.
Yeah.
And I know you've got a wonderful GP coming on next, talking about an incredibly important topic, which is how to stop this tremendous carbohydrate addiction that we have that is killing probably more people, with diabetes and obesity and heart disease than even, COVID-19. But I'd love to know Dr. David Unwin's position on this as well.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get David on it in a second. This is going to be a really busy week for you with all this research going on. I know hopefully we're going to get you into a lot of newspapers on TV. And also your book coming out on Thursday. Do we have an image for Flu Fighters, Jack? Flu Fighters coming out this Thursday on Kindle. And congratulations for doing that and turning it around so quickly. And what I'd like to ask is, so that's on Thursday. It's moving so fast, all this research. Could you maybe come back on Friday and give us more of an update?
Yeah, no problem at all.
That'd be
no problem.
That'd be absolutely brilliant. Patrick, thank you very, very much. We're going to keep plugging your book. I've read chapter 8. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I'm really frustrated that, if vitamin C was patentable, it would be heralded as the best drug ever invented.
Well, you're right. And just one point here is that chapter 9 you mentioned.
Sorry, chapter 9, yeah.
Which is called Surviving Respiratory Distress. I've made it free because this is the chapter that could save lives. And so please do go to flufighters.net, download that chapter, share it with as many people as you can. There is so much you can do to build your own immunity. That is really the message.
Jack, can we get a little strap on flufighters.net free chapter, and we'll get the graphic on straight away. We haven't said hello to Jack yet. Again, he's on his own. What, my children are deserting me with the show. I don't know what's going on. Say hello to Patrick, Jack.
Hey, Jack.
For those that don't know, Jack is supposed to be at university at the moment, but of course everything's cancelled. Patrick, thank you for updating us. We're going to keep that strap on about Flu Fighters all the way through today. Keep pushing people to your free chapter. And then if you can come back on Friday, give us an update after your book's launched. And I'm sure you have more research by then as well.
Thank you, Steve. Keep spreading the love.
We will indeed. Everybody, that was the incredible, fantastic Patrick Holford. He's written so many books. Flu Fighters just about to come out. I will tell you, probably one of my favourite books ever written on health. He brought out earlier, back middle of last year, called The Hybrid Diet. Really opened my eyes because I'm always low carb, no carb, low carb. But he talks about a hybrid solution, which is really, really interesting in the book here. Right, it is 20 past 10. Do we have the brilliant Dr. David and Jen Unwin? We do. How are you this morning, team?
Yeah, hello.
How are we?
Amusingly, we're waiting for our COVID virus tests.
Okay.
Yes, because the end of last week, I was given an oxygen saturation pulse oximeter, and I was convinced it wasn't working properly. And I came home to Jen and said, I don't think this is working. And I tried it on Jen, and it wasn't working very well on Jen either, or on my son, Edward.
Okay.
So we sent for a second one, And that gave us exactly the same results as the first one.
What does that mean?
We all had really low oxygen.
So all of us,
and racing hearts.
yeah, without knowing, we had a low oxygen saturation and a high pulse rate. And so we went off for NHS testing.
And
so
Edward's got a mild very mild temperature.
Yeah.
The 19-year-old.
What's interesting is even with quite low oxygen saturation, we didn't feel breathless. You just feel tired.
Right. Okay.
Particularly Edward, my son's home from university, and I thought he was just being lazy because he wouldn't go out walking, was lying around all day. Imagine how bad I felt when his oxygen saturation, I think it was down to about 93%, which is quite low.
Yeah.
And his pulse was 150, which is sky high at rest. Anyway, we're none of it, as you see, we don't look ill, do we?
No.
And we don't feel ill. And anyway, there it is. So we should get the results today.
And do you think you may have had it and have come through the other side, or?
Yeah, actually, we're better,
I think we've had mild, I think we've had,
we're better.
Well, that's what we're thinking anyway. It's just that was the effect of the virus. We've just had it very mildly. Edward's had it slightly less mildly because he did actually have a slight temperature. Mm-hmm. And David's supposed to be working in the hot zone on Wednesday, so we need the results so he doesn't pass it on to anyone else.
Absolutely. And what's it like in the surgeries and seeing patients at the moment in Southport? Is it obviously everybody's very concerned? The virus is spreading quite widely. What's it like on the ground as a GP at the moment?
My main thought is how considerate people are being. So that last week, I probably sorted out 90% of all the patients over the phone.
Wow.
And people are so considerate and grateful. I've been amazed by the response of the public and how considerate they've been. It's led to some innovative work. So we're sort of looking at people through windows to see how they look. We're beginning to Skype them, have a look over their phones to see how they are. I really particularly feel most for all of the people who are shielding. So I think we've got hundreds of patients in the practice who we've written to because they're at risk for whatever reason. And it must be so tough for them. So I have a lot of sympathy, really, because so many of them are elderly and at home and kind of worrying what will happen to me. And so we're trying to ring them up, really, to cheer them up. And as I say, reassure them that so many people have COVID, as I may well have myself. And you're not necessarily very ill at all.
Yeah.
So that's my main feeling. But we have a sense of impending worry, really, particularly with many nursing homes in Southport, many elderly people. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen? We don't know.
I'm going to ask you both a strange question. When you get your results back today, are you kind of hoping you have had it, or are you hoping that you haven't?
We're hoping we've had it.
We're hoping
because we've got two family households who are shielding.
Yeah.
So it would be nice to know that we've sort of come out the other side, and we obviously keep delivering food to them, but without the possibility of passing anything on, hopefully. Sure. Although we don't know totally that that's the case, do we? But it'd be nice to sort of think it's behind us. Obviously, you don't want any of your family to be ill, but we were discussing it this morning, and we were saying, well, what's the way out? That a vaccine is not likely in the medium term and may not even be possible in the long term. Most of us are going to have to have it at some point. So really, the point is, how do you give yourself the best chance, isn't it? And I'm sure that's. Yeah. I didn't hear all of what you were talking about with Patrick, but I'm sure that's what you were talking about. Is that really the control that we do have? It seems like a situation where there's nothing we can control, but actually you can start right now today to improve your chances. There's quite a lot known about the extra risk of metabolic problems, and you know, nutrition's such a key factor in that, as we all already thought. You know, we were just lucky to go into it with good metabolic health, just because this is how we've been living our lives for the last few years. You know, and we all feel kind of really so grateful that we discovered that knowledge a few years ago, and we've all been passionately trying to share it with everybody else. But I hope that, you know, now more than ever, people will really listen up about what can you do about metabolic health. Start now. I heard a fantastic podcast this week with Ron Rosedale. I don't know if you saw it, with
Ivor.
With Ivor.
Yeah.
And he was saying, you know, literally within days, if you change what you're doing, you can make a massive difference to your metabolic health.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the hopeful message, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be what we're going to talk about, really, because, you know, we just heard Patrick Holford saying that COVID is real and it's obviously having some devastating effects on lots of families. But let's not forget the overall, even probably bigger problem in society is metabolic syndrome and all these new diseases. You know, if you go back 100 years, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, obesity, they were hardly heard of 100 years ago, and yet today it's just everywhere. And
everywhere. And also, you know, why are some of us getting it really mildly, or like not at all? You know, like as Patrick was saying, there is evidence that people have, you know, just had it and would have the antibodies now. Was it antibodies? They'd have the antibodies now without even having noticed they'd had it. And some people are getting so critically ill. So, I mean, I think that's, you know, it's important to understand why that's happening. And I'm sure there is loads of research going on, but there's already stuff coming out. I saw a cohort from New York, which had the two highest risk factors for hospitalization as obesity and age. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you can't do much about your age, can you? But, you know, again, metabolic health is something that we can all start to do something about.
I just wanted to interrupt there. What's interested me in the risk factors for being really ill with COVID is that I was anticipating things like severe asthma and COPD to be really bad risk factors. And I saw a thing produced by Birmingham University the other day, and they were classifying the risks, and diabetes or obesity or hypertension were all more important than actually having poor lungs. Isn't that surprising?
It's amazing, isn't it? In fact, if you look at Wuhan, it was something like 60% of severe cases, or sadly those that died, had got 2.7 average conditions underlying it, and the two that came up the most, exactly what you just said, which is diabetes type 2 and high blood pressure. So let's focus on the positives right now, because we believe, don't we, that too much sugar and too much processed carbs causes most of these modern diseases, or can be associated with them. And we had the other day the brilliant Dr. Aseem Malhotra saying within 21 days you can make a huge difference to you know, your well-being by cutting down on processed carbs and cutting down on sugar. So I'd like to say to both of you, we'll start with David, you know, can you really live without sugar?
It's a great question. Well, I hope I'm an example of this. So I would say I've lived without sugar now very well for 7 years, isn't it? Yeah. So it's 7 years. So 7 years ago, we started with 18 of our patients in the practice in Southport, and we went completely sugar-free with those people and learnt alongside them how easy it is. Certainly, when you first think about it, you think, well, it would be really difficult. I suppose Jen would say we should begin with the improvements you might get and the things you hope for. What would you say, Jen, on that? You'd start with...
because we always start with that with the patients. You've got to, because I think we were saying last week, weren't we? This is a very simple message: give up sugar and processed carbs and eat real food. It's a simple message, but it's not always easy for people to do it because of the environment we live in, and because I certainly believe the evidence is there, and from my personal experience and the experience of patients, sugar and carbs are very addictive, and they act in an addictive way. So they kind of hijack your efforts to give them up in the same way as caffeine, nicotine, and other substances. So you've got to be highly motivated to start with, to try it, and then hopefully the benefits, which we all know do come, will help to keep you motivated and keep on track. And as you say, we've been doing it for 7 years, but a lot of our patients have as well. So it is possible. A lot people often say nobody's going to keep this up. Well, they do if the benefits outweigh the downside. So finding people's motivation, and that's a very individual thing. For some people, it is about weight. You know, a lot of us, I mean, I'm a person who struggled with my weight. I know you as well, Steve, all our lives. We're just that way out.
I was this wide, that big. My son loves, my son loves putting up that slide more than any slide. I spent my whole life wider than,
yeah, look, but it's worth celebrating, isn't it? And
I think so.
You know, I was the same. My weight was up and down all my life. We're just of those people, Steve, that would have been survivors back in the day.
Yeah.
Because we can make fat out of, you know, lettuce leaves, basically, can't we? We're fat storers.
The reality is, me in either of those states with COVID in my home would have been far more dangerous than if COVID comes into my home today. And I want to pick up on two things here, which is really, really interesting, because some people will take action on a 1-for-1 story. So there's a picture of me. That's a 1-for-1 story, much healthier today. But then other people like numbers and statistics. David, you got involved with diabetes.co.uk, a great company, and via their website, and you were right there at the beginning with them, or very near the beginning. Is it not true that you've helped, as a collective, a cohort, it's just not just us idiots, mad people that go, oh, it can happen. That chronic progressive disease that we were told, like my dad's still being told, that you will never get away from diabetes type 2. You and the people at diabetes.co.uk, there's like 70,000 people now with it in remission. That's big numbers.
So they are enormous numbers, aren't they? We certainly know, I think now that, is it 460,000 people have done the low carb program around the world. That's just huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And particularly in these times, that's a lot of people who, as you say, if their metabolic health is better, are facing this with the best possible chance.
Yeah.
Just going back to those risk factors again, my cheerful message is that if you have COPD or severe asthma, I'm not sure there's much you can do about damaged lungs or weak lungs. But things like diabetes and obesity and blood pressure, you definitely can do something about those. And that's what we've done in the practice now. So I've got very careful data that I've kept on 280 people who we've been looking after for the past few years. And they have really significant weight loss. I think the average weight loss for those 280 people is about 9.5 kilos.
Wow.
Which is a lot. The person who's lost the most, I think she's lost 9 stone now. Yeah. So on top of that, we've got significant improvements in blood pressure that I didn't expect when we started this adventure. The first thing I found myself was I felt a bit faint when I stood up too quickly, and that was my blood pressure improving. So we're getting improvements in weight, we're getting improvements in blood pressure. And then, of course, the thing I really did it for, which was improvements in type 2 diabetes. Actually, in the practice at the moment, of all the people who go low carb, 47% of them can expect to have drug-free type 2 diabetes remission at 2 years. So that's quite an amazing statistic and a hopeful one.
Absolutely.
Hopeful one.
And that's at 2 years. But even if somebody's sitting there right now watching going, crikey, I'm type 2 diabetic, you know, the figures of it if I do catch COVID, are quite frightening. But they can start literally day by day, can't they, getting into remission? And my guess is that every day a step in the right direction must be reducing the chances of serious side effects of COVID.
Yes, even you're absolutely right. If I think of it like this, so if you have type 2 diabetes, your problem is with sugar, you can't metabolize sugar easily. And so for you, I wonder, is sugar actually basically a type of poison? And would it be better to do without being poisoned? And I've seen people who've improved greatly by giving up sugar, certainly within a week to 2 weeks. In general practice, we monitor something called the hemoglobin A1C, which is how sugary has your blood been in the preceding couple of months. And using a hemoglobin A1C, the fastest I've ever seen somebody completely put their diabetes into remission was 38 days.
Wow.
So in 38 days, that was somebody with quite bad diabetes, and it was completely gone in 38 days on hemoglobin A1C.
So how hopeful is that? Someone could, start in the next couple of days, obviously research it, and David will tell you the caveats about medication, but when they come out of lockdown, they could have cured their own type 2 diabetes just by what they're eating, and hopefully a bit of walking or something like that, it will also help a little bit. But the main thing is what is people's nutrition.
Because my understanding, and obviously I'm not a doctor, but my understanding is that sugar in the bloodstream is a kind of poison, and that's one of the reasons we release insulin, to grab it and store it. And if you have got poison in your bloodstream, then you're asking your immune system to do a job. And my guess is while it's battling that excess of sugar, it's not as good at defending against other things. So that even for those that aren't diabetic, even if somebody's sitting there at home and they haven't got to lose any weight, but they like the biscuits and they like the chocolates, while your body's working on those and getting rid of that glucose out of the bloodstream, maybe that's weakening your defense against other things. So even if you're not diabetic, even if you're not overweight, maybe just cutting down the carbs and eating real, wholesome, natural food. And Asim Malhotra honestly believes that eating real food is the third best defense for COVID after social distancing and washing your hands. Maybe that's the reason we've got to cut down the sugar anyway.
Yes. I wonder if I could talk about insulin just for a minute.
Please do, yeah.
Favorite subject. So insulin is the hormone that we've been given to deal with sugar in your blood. So if you have something that's very sugary, maybe a bowl of cornflakes or something, your blood glucose goes up. And because a high blood glucose is actually dangerous, we've been designed wonderfully to get rid of that sugar quickly. And it's insulin which has the job of pushing sugar out of your bloodstream. And it pushes that sugar into your belly, which, Steve, we saw the photo of your belly before. That was insulin. Was trying to protect you from the effect of all that sugar you were eating and pushing it into safe storage in your belly. Yeah. And the other place that sugar gets pushed into your liver, and then the liver turns it into fat. And that's how we have now a situation where 20% of the whole of the developed world, 20% of everybody has got fatty liver.
Right.
So I've got thousands of people with this in the practice. And a fatty liver also causes your insulin not to work so well. Okay. And then the third place that sugar gets pushed is actually into the pancreas gland itself. Right. And there it's turned into fat and interferes with your production of insulin. And that is how, or those two things, fat in the liver and fat in the pancreas, that is partly how we have the epidemic of type 2 diabetes. And my final point is that if you have a high carb diet, you need a lot of insulin. And insulin does another funny thing. It causes you to hoard salt. And that is how a high carbohydrate diet leading to high insulin levels can put your blood pressure up. And I I wrote a paper with Dr. Scott Murray, a very well-known cardiologist, last year, showing how people's blood pressure improved on a low-carb diet. And so insulin potentially explains quite a lot of the important COVID risk factors: central obesity, Steve's belly,
Yeah.
high blood pressure, and diabetes itself. And that, so intriguingly and hopefully, leads to the idea that cutting back on sugar could be so very helpful, particularly at the moment. I think Jen wants to talk about, are you going to talk about leptin as well?
Well, I was only going to I was just so interested to listen to that podcast that I think you've also listened to, Steve, with Ivor Cummings and Ron Rosedale, about the importance of leptin, which is really involved in our immune systems. And if we have a lot of fat, we're releasing more leptin, and also if we eat more carbohydrates, and that leptin really interferes with how well your immune system works. And so that's just another link in the whole, it just brings everything sort of comes together, doesn't it?
It's like a big jigsaw.
It's a big jigsaw, really, we don't know all the ins and outs of it, but our bodies weren't really designed to live this sort of high sugar, high carbohydrate diet. When we evolved, we didn't have it available to us. It's become normal to have too much of it. So, that's the simple message really, is to reduce sugar, refine carbs, get them right down, eat plenty of real food, as Asim says, which is satisfying anyway. It's delicious, satisfying. It's what your body needs to run. It's what you need to run the machine in all kinds of ways. Absolutely. So mentally, physically, in terms of your immunity. I mean, I used to get a lot more kind of mild, flu-y type coldy things than in recent years. I touch wood tend not to suffer from those things now. I don't know if you notice that as well, but there does definitely seem to be an immune kind of function. Plus mental health. I mean, a lot of us are struggling. A lot of people are struggling at home alone, or worried. It's a very strange situation, and we know for sure. And there's been lots of studies now on the benefits of that kind of real food diet for mental health. Even quite severe conditions, mental health can be improved. You're going to feel just calmer, more positive, and be more on top of the things you need to be on top of as well. So we were talking before about the kind of motivation for doing it, and the gains that you can get. And once you start, it's a bit hard at the beginning. We all go through a bit of a withdrawal. You feel a bit rubbishy for the first week or so, but if you can just get through that, the kind of promised land at the other side, you'll have had that as well. After about day 7, day 8, you kind of, the world seems technicolor, and you suddenly kind of wake up and feel full of energy. And I think once people start to notice that benefit, the weight loss, then it becomes easy to keep going, because the benefits are there.
You're either on that roller coaster on a downward spiral, or you're on that upward spiral, and the second you can cross the chasm to life without the bread, the pasta and the rice, the better it gets. Before I go to the screen, we've got so many questions coming in for you. I've got a hypothesis about leptin, and for those that don't know what leptin is all about, leptin is a hormone that gets released that goes to the brain to tell us to stop eating. And my hypothesis is this, that it works fine with fat, it works fine with protein, but it doesn't work as efficiently with carbohydrates. And my hypothesis goes like this, that the only time we used to have an onslaught of carbohydrates before sort of modern days, where we relied on hunting and gathering our own food, the only time we'd have an overload on carbs was the fruit on the trees before we go to autumn. And I think nature designed that fault with our hunger hormone so that it just turned off a little bit with sugary foods, because if it didn't, we'd have one apple and we wouldn't take the second or third. But actually going into autumn, we wanted to put a lot of body fat on to get us through the winter where we wouldn't get as much food. So my hypothesis is that nature designed us so we would gorge on sugar, and we would gorge on apples, orange, loads and loads of fruit to store it as body fat to get through the winter. So I say to people that are overweight, you have got this hormone called leptin that's supposed to tell you when you are full, but it doesn't really work as well with the bread, the pasta, the rice. And that is one of the reasons why we just eat so much of it, because it doesn't work as well. And of course, the other reason it doesn't work as well, and the other reason we just keep eating, is that, we have that sugar sort of rush when we've eaten that big piece of bread. Then insulin does its job properly and gets rid of it. So we're on that carb coaster the entire time. So I always say to people, and because again, I don't want to blame myself too much for being obese for 25 years. It's kind of not your fault. It's just that hormone doesn't work as well when you keep gorging on carbohydrates. And my goodness, thank goodness for all those big corporate companies that sell us all that junk food, because that's what they're preying on. That's why they keep putting more and more sugar. They know that. They keep putting sugar in. They design their food to get us addicted. And my gosh, do we become addicted? Sorry, I just went off on one there.
It's a brilliant summary, really good summary. And I couldn't not agree. I just totally 100% agree with that analysis of the situation. And people will find it as well if they try this, that you're just not as hungry. I'm only eating once a day. I'm just having a big meal at lunchtime at the moment. Not hungry again till in a couple of hours time. That'll be me done.
I had your good friends on yesterday, Giancarlo and Katie, and they inspired me. I'd never made before flaxseed crackers, and last night I wanted some cheese. And I thought, what am I going to put it on? I went to the fridge, and there it is. That's last night. I couldn't find, I'd normally put my cheese and my homemade pate on to say maybe a lettuce. Hadn't got any. I thought, oh, I'll have a go at making them. And they taste great, because we've got to reduce the carbs. In fact, before we go to the answer some questions, David, can we put up one of your slides, if that's okay? Because you did some brilliant work.
Please do.
You did some amazing work that has really educated the country, and even NICU, which is part of the NHS, they've now endorsed your charts. And for those that don't know, David and his team went and studied how much sugar in certain things we eat turns into inside the bloodstream. In other words, when you eat a piece of bread, or when you eat pasta or rice, what effect does it have on the glucose level of the bloodstream? Jack, have we got one of David's charts? Oh, it's my chart, but all David's data. So isn't it frightening that an apple juice, just a regular glass of apple juice inside the bloodstream, turns into 8 teaspoons full of sugar? Or cornflakes at breakfast I used to poison my children with, 8 teaspoons for a tiny 30-gram serving. And we did our own research at home, and my son Tom, at the age of 12, was eating a 80-gram serving. So that was the equivalent of about 20 spoons of sugar inside the bloodstream. Whereas if we swapped it out for eggs, salmon, bacon, tomatoes, blueberries, then we have no effect on the blood sugar in the sugar in the blood. So my hypothesis again there would be that if COVID comes knocking on your door and you've just had apple juice, toast, cereals for breakfast, then your body's in defense mode trying to deal with that, and your immune system must be down while it's dealing with all that poison in the bloodstream. Whereas if you had the egg and the bacon, happy days.
Steve, I think the thing that I had missed, and it was a patient who pointed this out to me, was that it isn't just, if you have type 2 diabetes, often people say to me, well, I've got rid of sugar, so why am I fat, or why is my diabetes so bad? And I had forgotten about starch. I had forgotten that bread or potatoes is actually glucose. And that's what those charts are showing, that things that don't taste sweet convert into surprising amounts of sugar on digestion. So you wouldn't immediately think that bread would affect your blood glucose because it doesn't taste sweet. But the important point is that digestion breaks it down into sugar. And so that it's so easy to have a day that is sugar with your sugar with your sugar, because you'd go through the day having cereals, having bread, having a baked potato, all of which sound healthy enough. But again, if you have type 2 diabetes, they break down into surprising amounts of glucose. And that's why I did the charts, was to help people understand where their sugar may be coming from, and to help them perhaps make better dietary choices. As you have, Steve, look at you.
Well,
You look so well now.
It's so important that you've done that though, David, because that's why the book's called Fat and Furious, because on days when I was obese and I wanted to be conscious of my food, what would I have? I'd have a big jacket potato, thinking that that was really healthy because it's one of your 5 fruit and veg a day, and yet it was the wrong food choice. But I had no idea. I had no idea that it was the potato that was putting on the weight. I knew crisps were bad. I knew Coca-Cola was bad. I knew snacking was bad. But half of my diet, pasta, rice, potatoes, was just as bad as the can of Coke. I mean, look at that. A jacket potato, a large one, 15 teaspoons equivalent of sugar going into the body. Whereas if I swap that out for other vegetables that are healthy vegetables, and swapped it out for the mushrooms, the cabbage, the celery, the broccoli, the spinach.
Yeah.
No effect on the blood sugar levels at all.
Yeah, and also micronutrients. So like you were talking about with Patrick, jacket potato, there's some stuff in it, isn't there? But if you compare that to all those other veg that you had listed at the bottom, or, if you happen to have some, some fish or some protein, some dairy, so much more nutrient dense in terms of what we need to actually run the brain and the body.
Yeah.
Another thing I'd like to just add is, certainly for me, I was 55 years old and starting with middle-age spread. Yeah, Jen's going for a minute. And I thought it was just age. I thought, well, 55-year-old blokes do have a bigger tummy and you are a bit sleepy. And the other message of hope is that I'm over 60 now and I've more energy than I had when I was 55. I don't have middle-age spread. My blood pressure is better. And that I'm seeing this so often with patients as well, that they were just quietly accepting what they thought was inevitable age. And it doesn't have to be. And again, Steve, that's what you found out yourself, isn't it? Your middle-age spread doesn't have to be.
And look at all the success stories like Tom Watson. Look how Tom looks different today, and all by really following your charts and going, crikey. And isn't that the most important thing for people? Understand what turns into sugar, and then try and change your diet for things that don't. I've got hundreds of questions, I think, here. Let me
Right,
dive.
let's have some.
Let's dive straight in. Where do we go? Oh, crikey, lots and lots of questions. Sheila says, why is nothing said about boosting immune health and eating correctly? Why is the focus on vaccines which have potential side effects? We'll save, do you want to jump in on that, or should we save that for Patrick?
That's more of a Patrick.
That's a Patricky.
Yeah.
That's a Patricky one. I mean, I suppose vaccines, yes. Well, we should be doing both, shouldn't we?
We should be doing both. Yeah.
Let's. I'd love people to be as healthy as they could, and if we can have a vaccine,
Hooray.
Great. But I think we've probably got at least a year without a vaccine. So why don't we get ourselves as healthy as possible?
Let's not just wait.
Yeah, let's not wait.
Chris Patterson, or I think said, I went cold turkey with sugar and grains after a week. I did miss them, but that was 4.5 years ago. So,
well done, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it?
You do. Obviously, the brain's kind of hijacked by this stuff. As you said, Steve, it's to do with survival. So it's sugars and carbohydrates kind of act on the very primitive part of the brain. So it's hard to think yourself out of it. It's hard to, if you ever had that experience of actually watching your hand reaching for a biscuit, even when you've said to yourself in the morning, I'm eating healthy today, and then the biscuits are on the side, you get in from work, you're hungry, and you sort of watch your hand doing it, and you're thinking, the logical part of your brain is thinking, why am I doing that? That's because your primitive brain is driving that eating behavior, that survival behavior. So, just as Chris did, really, you need to kind of almost act your way out of it. So you need to change the environment. If you're living in a house with people who do want to eat sugar, even if you don't have your own cupboard, don't be cued by stuff. Don't go down those aisles in the supermarket. Maybe do online shopping for a bit. Avoid at the beginning those kinds of situations where you would always eat cake. Whatever that is for you, avoid your triggers for a bit, and then, as Chris has managed to do, you see the benefits, and then you can keep it up for years, like yourself, Chris, and people like us, because you feel so much better. But those early days are a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. Can I just say something?
Sure.
There are clinically, when I'm dealing with addiction, there's only really two ways to deal with it. One is cold turkey abstinence, and the other is substitution. So I use methadone for the heroin addicts, trying to wean them off that heroin. And in fact, so that Jen and I give an example is that Jen went cold turkey very quickly, whereas I was a bit of a wimp, and it took me a year to get off biscuits. I had to substitute, first of all, oat biscuits for chocolate biscuits, and then almonds for the for the oat biscuits. So it took me actually a year of substituting. If I probably had my time again, I'd do the cold turkey. But somehow I was so addicted to those biscuits, and it was partly how I coped with the strain of being a GP. So it was quite difficult for me to cope with the same stress without the biscuits, which
Anyway,
sounds pathetic.
more
questions, please.
No, but that's a really important topic. What I say to a lot of people is, look, I've just dropped the price of that to $3.99 on Kindle, and all the profit goes to the food bank, the Trussell Trust. And the first thing you need to do, really, I think, is you need to, whether it's my book or Patrick's or anybody's book, read a book around low carb, high fat, around intermittent. Read a book. You've got to get the knowledge, because the thing is, if you don't have the knowledge, you don't know what to avoid. And then once you've got the knowledge, pick a day, and maybe Monday, or it doesn't matter what day, pick a day and say, that's the day I'm going to start. But before that, go in your cupboards, get rid of everything with your newfound knowledge that you know turns into sugar. Go and give that to maybe the food banks, or just get rid of it out of the home, and pick a day to start. And then, but you need to probably get a recipe book. You need to maybe get Giancarlo's book, because you need some substitutes, don't you? You know, if last night I didn't know that I could make a flaxseed biscuit, which is really, really healthy, and if I didn't know all about bread, I would have put bread under the cheese. So you've just got to have a bit of knowledge, and then I think sort of pick a day, don't you think?
Yeah, pick a day. Yeah, definitely. And anyone with diabetes, so diabetes.co.uk that we mentioned before have a fantastic low carb program. It's all online. That's what's been so successful, and they've got 70% off at the minute. So it's really cheap, you know, and there's loads of videos and there's support recipes. So it's got all the knowledge. So that's another way. If people like to learn sort of maybe online or via video, check out the low carb program, which is NHS approved.
Yeah, and of course we've got more time on our hands, aren't we? We can't go to restaurants. We've got to change our eating habits, because McDonald's is closed and KFC is closed. So
hooray!
Okay, what would we have given to close those all down without? If we could have found a way, if we could have done it without a virus, it would have been happy days. But mind you, in America apparently McDonald's are still open, which is driving me nuts. But McDonald's closed, KFC closed, Greg's, all the places that are high in carbs. So we have to change our eating habits. So take a bit of that spare time. Maybe you're not traveling to work at the moment. Take that spare time on your hands to learn about food, fill your home with things that are low in carbs, and then pick a day to go for it. More questions coming up. Let's go to Bernie. Bernie says, is the effervescent vitamin C quicker to absorb than tablet form? I mean, they're both equally excellent, Bernie. The key thing is get your vitamin C up. Social Mobility says, education is so important. I was eating healthily brown rice and healthy whole wheat pasta. Again, I was the same. I thought, well, that brown stuff is better, eat more of it. But again, it still turns into sugar. Neil said, is there anything else that spikes insulin besides sugar, such as sugar substitutes?
I don't know all the evidence for that. I think there is some evidence around sweeteners. Partly it might be that when your body tastes that sweet taste, it kind of responds in a conditioned way by
the children
producing
thing. They
insulin.
did. There was a really interesting study where they took two bunches of kids, an RCT, and they gave one sugary drinks, and they gave the other bunch 0 calorie sweetened drinks. And what was interesting is the group on the 0 calorie, the sweeteners, ended up fatter than the kids on the sugary drinks. So that there seems to be something about appetite. And certainly in the work that Jen and I do for our patients, I would say come off sweeteners if you can, because it resets it resets your palate and you start enjoying food in a different way.
Yeah.
When I think of all the relatives I used to have who were fat with sweeteners, and none of them ever seemed to get any slimmer. They were always having sweeteners in tea and coffee. And I don't remember sweeteners helping very many relatives or patients.
Particularly if you've got that sugar addiction type tendency, it just keeps the cravings going, and people start doing this keto cookies and keto, you're not going to, you can still put on weight, even eating keto, if you're eating lots of those kinds of treaty type, snacky type foods. So
there's kind of two. There's probably two issues actually, isn't it? There's the issue that you then never get rid of the craving for sugar, and therefore you don't change your palate. And again, Nina Teicholz was saying that she believes on average it only takes 2 to 3 weeks to change the taste buds. So your taste buds won't change, and because I don't know what you think, but I find real food so much more tasty than the bread,
absolutely.
the pasta, and the rice. But it probably took a reprogramming of the mouth, maybe.
Yeah, totally. You can taste the sweetness in things like almonds and dairy. Yeah.
It's weird. Once you've done without rice, you wonder, people say to me, how can I live without bread? How can I live without rice? And they're the boring bits, aren't they?
Yeah.
And once you enjoy the rest of the meal, you wonder, why did I ever worry about giving up rice? Another question.
Jackie says, David and Jen, listening to you, Michael Mosley, etc. So listening to both of you and Michael Mosley helped me reduce my HbA1c by 25%. Thanks. 3 years on, maintaining it and fit. What about occasional sugary treats? Is that bad?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
I love that question.
That depends on can you do it? Can you do the fantastic mythical unicorn of moderation? Now, I do know one or two people who can actually do moderation, including David's mum. Can you do it and then get straight back on track? I can't personally. I've tried it and have ended up way off the wagon on occasion. So I now accept that I don't treat myself in that way. I find other non-food related ways, but some people can. So there isn't one answer about that. It's really a personal thing.
Well, I think monitor. Mm-hmm. Monitor. So be honest. Find out, are you having an occasional treat, or is it carb creep? That's the number of patients after Christmas, we have to recalibrate them, get them back, because carb creep, the treats are once a week and then become every day.
You know what?
Be really honest with yourself. Yeah. Is this a treat or is it winding you up, as I was with the biscuits? And if you can do it, like my mother, if she's listening, great. But many people can't. And I do a lot of work trying to help people with carb creep. Yeah. That I wish they hadn't started with the treats. I don't like the word treat.
It's a personal thing. Yeah.
So confession time. Confession time. My pub's closed at the moment because of obviously COVID. We went to there the other day just to check it was all okay. We looked at a big box of crisps, the Walker's crisps that we sell in the pub, going out of date next month. I thought, look, we'll take them to the food bank. So we took them home. And then we spoke to the food bank, they didn't want them. So we got this big box of crisps at home. And what do? We got 5 kids at home, it's Easter, and we're watching movies more than we normally would, and I had a pack of crisps. Then I had another pack of crisps. An hour later, I had another pack of crisps. Next day, the same. Last week, I put on 4 pounds in weight, which is the biggest weight gain I've had, because I've never heard the phrase till you just said it, David, but it's carb creep. And this week I've had to go, no, come on, just stop being silly. You know what you're supposed to be doing. Back on it as of today. But different people.
Steve, you learned something. The other thing Jen and I talk about is learning from mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always reclassify, well, Jen has taught me this, to be fair. Reclassify failure. It's not a failure, is it? You learnt something really important.
Yeah.
Foolish people don't learn from experience. You're not a foolish person, and you're reflecting there on what I won't do again. So I always say to people, well, last Christmas was a disaster and you've gained weight. How will you do Christmas differently next time?
Yeah.
How will you face a big box of crisps next time?
Yeah.
I'd get some hens. I would buy some hens and feed those crisps to the hens and then eat the eggs.
And,
I know you've been trying to get me to have chickens for years. I have. I'm going to.
It shows how sneaky the addiction can be, because that's how we say to ourselves, and I've done the same. Oh, just one, or it's a special occasion, or I need it because there's all these little mental. The addiction's always trying to get you back onto it.
Well, here's a great comment here from somebody called Rob Sams. He said, I was 112 and in 2 months got down to 38. That was 6 years ago. My range now is between 36 and 42. Is he talking about HbA1c?
HbA1c.
Yes.
So I take it 112 is really dangerous and 38 is in a good range.
It's incredibly high.
Yeah.
So the normal, so that's hemoglobin A1c in millimoles per mole. And the normal one is below 42. So to have a hemoglobin A1c of above 100 is spectacularly worrying type 2 diabetes. And to bring it down like that to a normal range,
amazing.
That is diabetes in remission. Well done, my friend. You should be so proud.
And the difference of going into this, this pandemic with those results.
Yeah.
He could
He's
have
much
saved
safer
his life
now.
there. Yeah.
He's much safer now.
And what's interesting there, HbA1c, that's just for a layman like me, that's sugar coating the blood cells. Is that correct? How much sugar you've got around the red blood cells?
Right. So it's not quite, Steve, but nearly.
Okay.
So when a baby red blood cell is born, it's born into a sugary environment, and the amount of sugar as that baby red blood cell is born, the concentration of the sugar attaches permanently to that red blood cell. So if you took millions of red blood cells and assessed how sugary is each red blood cell, you would have an idea of how averagely sugary your blood has been when all those red blood cells were being born. And because a red blood cell lives for about 120 days, what you're seeing with the hemoglobin A1c is how averagely sugary have you been in the preceding 120 days, because none of your blood cells live longer than 120 days.
Got you.
All right?
No, that's fantastic. I've just definitely learned something there. Sheila, yep, I've been eating once a day for the past 4 to 5 months. So Sheila's an OMAD, 1 meal a day person like myself. And I think you quite often do OMADing. I know Jen is a big OMAD, 1 meal a day.
If you eat enough protein and fat I'm doing it at lunchtime at the minute. If you eat enough protein and fat at lunchtime, you just don't need another meal necessarily.
Sheila Ford says, I moved on to carnivore on 1st of March, still on it and loving it. I'm interviewing Sean Baker, Dr. Sean Baker from the States later this week, who's gone 100% meat eating. And that's going to be a really interesting conversation, because apparently
he's a very interesting guy.
Yeah, I've never met him before, so I'm really excited about that one. So hi Steve. If a person is not diabetic, is there any requirement to maintain sugar levels? Can it be any measurement in all groups, like below 30 or between 30 to 45? Is there a requirement if you're not diabetic? And I would say to that one, again, not a doctor, but simply, we know sugar is effectively poison in the body, so why not minimize it, would be my advice. What would you think, David?
Yeah.
Well, if this relates, I was going to say a word on this anyway, and that is, of course, for people with type 2 diabetes who are on insulin or some of the other drugs, those drugs can pull down their blood glucose So they actually, some of them do need to have some carbs, because obviously if you reduce the carbs and you're on insulin, you're going to have a very low blood sugar. But if you don't have diabetes and you're therefore not on insulin or any of the drugs that affect blood glucose, your body actually is perfectly capable of manufacturing all of the sugar you need to keep your blood glucose normal. And that would be, so Jen and I haven't had any sugar, or really we have very little carbohydrate for 7 years, and our blood glucose on the whole is normal. And that's being maintained because our body can actually manufacture glucose. It's done in the liver.
So the answer is, isn't it, that all food breaks down into carbohydrates, protein and fat. Carbohydrates really is just energy. Protein's building blocks of life. Fat is multifunctional. And people think you need all three to live healthy. The reality is you can live with 0 carbohydrates absolutely perfectly fine. That's what Dr. Sean Baker is doing. Of course, we don't want 0 carbs because we want to eat green leafy vegetables because they're full of vitamins and minerals. So we're getting sufficient carbs there. Just cut out the processed food is our recommendation. Hey team, we've gone way over today. Thank you for being on. And what time are you expecting your results to come?
Today or tomorrow.
I shall be. Yeah. We'll be tweeting them when they.
We'll let you know.
Low Carb GP on Twitter. I'll tell you.
Low carb.
I want it to be positive. I'm hoping I've got COVID. I hope so. Let's get it over with.
Let's get it over and done with. Look, guys, you've been absolutely fantastic. Love to have you back on sometime in the next couple of weeks.
We'll come on again.
You're a true inspiration, both of you, and I will promise I'll get some hens in my garden at some point. And and I will keep sharing that chart that you compiled, because that's the key message. If there's, I mean, I've got, I don't know, 300 pages in my book. The most important page in the entire book is your page with all what turns into sugar in the body. When you know that, you can do something about it. David, Jen, God bless you. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Goodbye.
That was the brilliant unwins. We will get them back. We've run over by a quarter of an hour today. Thank you for all of your comments. We do ask you, if you've enjoyed the show, to put comments below. If you've enjoyed the show, please go and share it with other people. We have brilliant guests and brilliant doctors on every single day. But what we'd ask you in return for, you know, learning from some of these great experts is simply this: go and make a little donation to the Trussell Trust right now. There are people starving in our own country that need our food bank support. Just donate £5 or £10. I'll match it pound for pound for every single donation you make up to £100,000. We just desperately want to help drive hunger out of the UK. Jack wants to show you a clip before you go. We'll play this out to the end. God bless. Please tell everybody about the Food Bank Show, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
When you have to go without everyday things, food, hot water, heating, that's really, you know, it's a really hard way to have to live, really, and that's devastating for most people. Start to make a lot of mistakes at work, and they suggest that I see a doctor, who diagnosed me with, at that time, work-related stress.
I unfortunately took 2 TIA strokes. I did spend a time in hospital to come out to discover that I couldn't go back to my work.
Worked all my life, army, sales, when my health deteriorated with a heart condition. Then my married life deteriorated as well.
After a period of time, they decided it wouldn't be viable for me to return to that kind of work because I couldn't handle the pressure of it, so it led me into the benefit system.
We just started to struggle. Things started to get quite sort of dramatic, and you know, things were just starting to get on top of me because I just wasn't doing what I should have been doing as a mother.
I do have a 10-year-old daughter as well, so I do try and provide for her as well, which makes it more difficult, but it's a case of trying to budget or having to go without. think if the food bank had not been there to keep me going, I don't think I'll be here today.
No, I'm not needing the food bank anymore, but I'm glad it was there when I needed the help.
To find out that there is places there that can help you with food and other things, it's an amazing thing to have put in front of you.